Good day, Year 9. Hopefully we have gotten through the previous lessons. This is the last lesson of week 3, and we're going to be moving on from stem cells and cells and looking at the bigger picture. We're going to be going into tissues and organs. So hopefully you have got all of the things that you're going to need. We are going to need a pencil and a ruler, because there will be a table that we'll be completing later on. Okay, so before we get going, just a little recap of a previous lesson. We've got a eukaryotic cell here. Can you very quickly just draw out the cell, try and have a go at labeling the different structures that have been labelled in the picture, and also what each of their functions are. So if you could pause the video now and have a go at that. Okay, so hopefully we've had a go at labelling the different parts of a eukaryotic cell, and hopefully we realise that because it is a eukaryotic cell that it has got a nucleus. So that is the dark region, often represented as a circle. And that is what controls the cell, and it's where the genetic information is stored. B is a mitochondria. The mitochondria, that's where the chemical reaction of respiration takes place, so they're able to release energy for all of the activities that the cell does. We've got some ribosomes, so those are the circular structures inside the cell, and they are there for synthesis of proteins, making proteins. Next bit, the bit that looks like an empty space but is not an empty space, is a jelly-like substance where the chemical reactions take place, is the cytoplasm. Hopefully we realise that this is an animal cell, so there is only one layer on the outside. It does not have a cell wall, but it does have a cell membrane, and the cell membrane controls what goes in and out of the cell. Okay, so we're going to be looking at tissues and organs in this lesson. So usual success criteria, basics of stating some different types of cells, which you should already know from previous lessons, some tissues, organs and organ systems, and also knowing what the levels of that organisation is. Hopefully we'll then be able to say what the function is of different organs, so what they do, and the organ systems, and identifying organs within those organ systems. And then hopefully, for the top levels, we'll be able to say what those organ systems do for the organism, why they're so important. Okay, so you don't need to write this down, you can just think of it to yourself, but can you try to explain the difference between a unicellular organism and a multicellular organism? So think of an example of a unicellular organism, think of an example of a multicellular organism, and have a go at explaining the differences between them. So remember, if you were explaining something, we need to try and think about why that is the way it is. Okay, so pause the video, have a little think to yourself, and then we'll go over the answer. Okay, so you might have been thinking for unicellular organisms, you've got things like bacteria. Multicellular organism, you could be thinking of a human or any of the other animals, or indeed plants. And a big difference between them is obviously a unicellular is only made up of one cell, and in multicellular you've got lots of cells, and often they will come together to form different tissues like muscles, which bacterial cells don't have, and organs. So because unicellular organisms are so small, it means that they've got a very large surface area compared to their volume. Okay, so if you break something down, it increases its surface area compared to its volume. Now, because it's got such a large surface area, it means that unicellular organisms can just get everything that they need through their cell membrane. Any oxygen that they might need, any nutrients that they might need can just pass through the cell membrane. But when you get larger, when organisms get larger, you have your multicellular organisms. They can't do that. So if you think of something like elephants, they're made up of trillions of different cells. So there isn't enough surface area for all of those things that are needed for the cell to just go across the cell membrane, either through osmosis or diffusion or active transport. So they've had to develop some different structures that enable all of those important chemicals to actually get around to every single one of those trillions of cells. So during the development of multicellular organisms, cells differentiate. We looked at that in a previous lesson, so they becoming specialized to carry out specific function. We've already said there's about 200 different types of cells. So you might be able to remember some of those specialized cells. There are some pictures that can give you a hint on the right-hand side. You've got egg cells, red blood cells, sperm cells, muscle cells, epithelial cells. All of those are specialized to perform a function. Okay, so what we're going to do now, using your pencil and ruler, obviously, can you draw out the table that you can see on the slide? We've got the different levels of organization going from the smallest to biggest. So the smallest level of organization is cells. Then you go up to tissues, then organs, organ system, and then organism. Can you take the words or sentences that are around the table and put them in the correct place on the table? So you've got to find the definition for each one of those levels of organization, an example in plants, and an example in animals. Okay, this will take a little bit of time for you to do, so pause the video and have a go at completing that. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that. Don't worry if any of these are wrong, you can just correct them as we go through. But we should, for cells, they are the smallest unit of an organism. Okay, and indeed some organisms are just one cell. An example that you might have had in plants are palisade cells, xylem, phloem, you might have had mesophyll cells. Any of those are good examples. Example in animals, glandular cells. So in animals we have glands. We're going to be talking about those a little bit more, and they tend to be to do with secreting certain chemicals. For the level of organization of tissues, this is where you have a group of cells with a similar structure and function which all work together to do a particular job. So a really good example that you might do in PE is muscles. They contain muscle cells, and then if you've got lots of muscle cells coming together, you have a muscle, and that is to do with contracting, relaxing, so movement and things like that. Examples in plants would have been the leaf epithelium, so that is the layer of cells that is for protection. And then the example in plants could be the stomach lining. Now, we'll talk a lot about the digestive system in next week's lessons, which is why they often come up in the examples. For organs, they're made of a group of different tissues which all work together to do a particular job. So if you think of something like the heart, which you know is an organ, that's going to contain lots of different tissues. Most of it will be muscular tissue, but you're also going to have fat, nervous tissue, things like that, that will perform the function of pumping blood. Examples in plants are leaves. So leaves are an organ of a plant. And in animals, the answer was a stomach. For organ systems, they're made up of different organs that work together to do a particular job. So you can see how it's, as you go up each level of organization, they're all performing a job, but they're coming together to do an overall system. Example in plants are the photosynthetic system. So that is all to do with obviously photosynthesis, making that glucose for the plant. An example in animals is the digestive system. For an organism, this is an individual plant, animal or single-celled organism. So bacteria are organisms, even though they only contain one cell. An example of plants will be a daffodil. An example in animals, will be humans. Okay, now we're going to do something a little bit different. I've got 7 questions here. Obviously, you are currently on your computer, so hopefully you've got access to sites where you are going to be researching the answers to these 7 questions. So question number 1 is, what are the 2 things that muscle tissue can do? And you might find more than 2 things for this, but if you could pop down 2. Number 2, give an example of a muscle that contracts voluntarily and one that contracts involuntarily. Okay, you might have done that in PE if any of you take PE as an option, but there's 2 different types, ones that contract voluntarily, so you think about them, and some that contract involuntarily, where it happens without you thinking about it. Number 3, give one example of where glandular tissue is found in the body. So if you are unsure what glandular tissue is, look that up first and then find out where you can find it in our bodies. Number 4, why must the glandular tissue be close to capillaries? So glandular tissue does something really important, so hopefully you can link that to why they need to be near capillaries, which are teeny tiny blood vessels. Number 5, why would the human digestive system need glandular tissue? So again, linking what glandular tissue does, linking that to the digestive system and what that does. Number 6, how are epithelial tissues specialized? So you need to find out epithelial tissues in humans and how they are specialized for their job. And number 7, where in the body would you find epithelial tissue? So again, if you could pause the video and allow you to find out the answers to those 7 questions. So here are the answers that you might have come up with. As I say, there are other options that you can have. But what are the 2 things that muscle tissues can do? They're able to contract. And it also has the ability to conduct electrical impulses, which is obviously going to be important because it's going to be connected to the nervous system, so that you can actually think about moving. Number 2, give an example of a muscle that contracts voluntarily. So you might have put skeletal muscles. So those are the ones that are joined to your skeleton, which allow you to move. And involuntarily, ones will be things like cardiac muscle or smooth muscle. Cardiac muscle is what makes up our heart, and smooth muscles you find in places like the digestive system. Number 3, give one example of where glandular tissue is found in the body. So we find it inside organs, it's found in endocrine glands, so those are the ones that release hormones, and also exocrine glands. Number 4, why must the glandular tissue be close to capillaries? That's because they're secreting these substances that can then get into the blood system and then be moved around the body. Number 5, why would the human digestive system need glandular tissues? So in the digestive system, the first part is in your you chewing up the food in your mouth, and you produce something called saliva. And so you have salivary glands that will produce that saliva. You also have it in different stages of the digestive system, which we'll look at next week, where enzymes and things like that are produced. Number 6, how are epithelial tissues specialized? So they're arranged very evenly and smooth. So it gives that nice smooth surface. And that allows the organ to move freely around other organs. And it also forms a protective coat around that organ. And finally, number 7, where in the body would you find epithelial tissue? The surface of the body, so it's the top layer of our skin. So hopefully you were able to find out some information about that. Don't worry if you got a slightly different answer. You can add the ones that I've just gone through to your answer. Okay, so we've said already when we did our table that organs are collections of tissues. So each organ contains several tissues, and all of those tissues work together to perform a specific function. A good example of where we can see this happening is in the stomach. Again, as I say, the stomach is part of the digestive system. It's going to be very important in next week's lessons. So here is a picture of a stomach. You've got different cross sections on here, so you can see those different tissues. On the outside, we have that epithelial tissue. So that covers the outside of the stomach. So it allows it to move around with other organs and also creates that protective layer. We then have muscular tissue. So this contracts and that causes the wall of the stomach to move. And that's really important because that churns up all of the contents of our food, mixes all of those digestive juices in with the food. The next layer is the glandular tissue, and that produces acid and enzymes, and it produces particular types of enzymes that we'll look at next week. But it produces that hydrochloric acid, which helps with the digestion of food, getting the right pH, and also killing pathogens. And the final layer is the inner epithelial tissue, and that covers the inside of the stomach. Okay, so that was mainly focusing on the digestive system because that's a big part of this chapter. But can you think of any other organ systems that we have inside of us? Okay, you don't need to write these down, but you have to think about other systems that you know about other than the digestive system. You can pause the video and have a think about that. Okay, so it's just an illustration, show different ones. Reproductive system, something that you cover in year 7. You've got the urinary system, which is obviously in the formation of urine and expelling that urine. You might have said respiratory system, that's quite a common one. So that's looking at the lungs. Respiration doesn't happen in the lungs, but it's about getting that oxygen into the blood to get to the cells. Digestive system, it's a very common one that you might know about. The lymphatic system, so that's removing certain things from our body. Endocrine system, this is looking at, these are all the glands that produce the hormones. Circulatory system, that's quite a commonly spoken about one, so you might have done that, and that's about circulating the blood around. The nervous system, the muscular system, skeletal system. There's also the integumentary system, always hate pronouncing that, which is looking at skin and things like that. Okay, so looking at these common systems that we had on the previous one, all of them have got certain adaptations to make it really effective at doing its job. Now, these adaptations can include things like increasing the surface area of part of an organ system. Now, this comes up so many times in biology, surface area. So if you're ever in doubt in an exam question, try and link it to surface area. Many different organs will increase their surface area to make sure that they're getting as much as possible into the blood or out of the blood or out of the lungs and things like that. A rich blood supply to areas where exchange takes place. Areas with a short diffusion distance, so those particles don't have far to move from one place to the other down that concentration gradient. Mechanisms to increase the concentration gradients by ventilating surfaces. So if you get rid of those particles that have just moved across, then that will keep that concentration gradient so more will move over. All moving materials on. Now, we spoke a lot about diffusion. We looked at some different examples of exchange surfaces. So I'd like you to have a think if you can remember any places where diffusion or osmosis, things like that, where they occur inside our body. Okay, so ones that we spoke about a lot in the, I think it was in the first week now, is the alveoli in the lungs. And if you look at the picture which one? So if you go second from the right, that is a good picture of the alveoli. You can see there's a good blood supply around it, capillaries that are taking that oxygen away. We've also got the villi in the digestive systems. That's the middle picture. And also on the far right as well. And they're really, really important because they increase that surface area to get the most amount of nutrients into our blood. Okay, now in this table, you don't need to, don't panic, you don't need to write any of this. But what I'd like you to have a go at is you can see that down on the left-hand side on the name of system, you've got 8 different systems that are numbered. And on the right-hand side, you've got the function, which have got letters on them, which say the function. So could you have a go at matching up the name of the system and what you think the function is of that system? So you can just write 1 equals and then whatever letter it is. So you are going to have to pause the video. If you could have a go at that, and then we'll go over the answers in a minute. Okay, so hopefully we've had a go at that, just putting down the name of the system and what you think the function is. There are a couple in there that are very important, but we're going to go into more detail in lessons next week and the week after. So you don't need to write any of them down, just being aware of them. So hopefully we got the number 1, the excretory system. That is all about removing waste from the body. And that's not to do with feces. That's looking at other waste products, often excreted in things like urine. Number 2 is the nervous system, and that is for sensing and responding to the environment. So hopefully we've got 2A. Number 3, the muscular system, is all to do with movement and posture of the body. So hopefully we put 3 is E. Number 4, the circulatory system. This is to do with transport of blood around the body. So hopefully we put 4C. Number 5, the digestive system. That's extracting nutrients from food. So hopefully we've got 5B. Number 6, the skeletal system. That is support of the body, protection of vital organs, and also in movement. So we should have 6G. Number 7 is the reproductive system, and hopefully we put this produces reproductive cells, clues in the name there, and enable reproduction to take place. So number 7 is H, which means that number 8, the respiratory system, is allowing breathing. Okay, breathing is to do with getting the oxygen into that blood supply in our lungs. So hopefully we're able to do those. So we will be finishing this lesson with one final question for you to have a go at. And it's a 6-marker. And all of you will have to do 6-marker questions, as I'm sure you are aware, in the exams. So here's a good time for you to have a practice at doing this. So the question is, describe how the stomach is adapted for its role in the digestion of food. And it's going to be worth 6 marks. So I'm going to ask you to pause this video, have a go at answering that question. If you're really struggling, then go back. There is the slide that had the picture of the stomach and different tissues that are involved in it. So have a go at describing how the stomach is adapted for its role in the digestion of food. So if you could pause now. Okay, so we're going to go over the answer. So grab a different coloured pen and tick where you have put one of these points that would be in the mark scheme. So you could talk about there's the layer of the muscular system that contracts to churn up the food. That would be worth the mark. You could talk about mixing it with digestive juices to help with digestion. That would be worth a mark. You might have said that there are glandular tissues that produce enzymes or acids to break down food. That would be a mark. You could say that the lining of the stomach has got an increased surface area. That would be a mark. You can say that there's epithelial tissue that covers and protects the stomach on the outside and also on the inside. So that also would be worth a mark. So give yourself a total out of 6. You also, as you can see at the bottom, get a mark for the quality of your written communication. So that means that if it is legible and makes sense, kind of like the example above, then you'll be awarded a mark for that. So give yourself a total out of 6. Hopefully we got 6 or near to a 6. They are good practice. Okay, so that concludes our lesson, the final lesson of the week. So next week we're going to be looking at the digestive system in humans, and then, as I say, there's a couple of other systems that are going to crop up. There is a required practical in next week, so that will be one of the lessons that will be done by Mrs. Corbett. So do make sure that you pay particular attention to that lesson because it will often come up. Okay, I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I hope that you are all well and safe and haven't gone completely crazy from the lockdown. Keep up the good work, keep on top of it, and you can now have a go at doing those doddle questions. Now, the doddle questions will be taken off in a couple, we'll probably give it a week as well. So you've got a week to have a go at doing them if you don't fancy doing them over the weekend or right now. Okay, take care. Goodbye.